Good morning, everyone. I declare this meeting of Kempsey Shire Council open. I welcome everyone. I remind all people attending this meeting that it is being webcast on YouTube with audio and vision. There should be no defamatory comments made by anyone. A recording of the meeting is available on the internet and is required to be available for 12 months. Private recording of the meeting should not occur. Only members of the media are allowed to make a recording. All members of the public are entitled to attend council meetings to observe. Please refrain from interjecting or undertaking any behaviour that will stop councillors here from undertaking their important tasks of decision making. Please ensure all devices like mobile phones are on silent mode. On behalf of council, I welcome all people to our meeting today. Please wear your mask correctly, covering both your nose and mouth. Councillors in attendance are Councillor Josh Freeman, Councillor Anthony Patterson, Councillor Alexandra Wyatt, Councillor Arthur Bain, Councillor Kerry Riddington, Councillor Vijay Craigie, Councillor Simon Ferguson. Council staff in attendance are Manager of Governance Thorogood, General Manager Craig Milburn, Director Planning and Operations Robert Fish, Director Corporate and Commercial Stephen Mitchell. I would like to acknowledge at this point all 8 councillors who are presently facing incredible pressure as defendants in the Supreme Court. There is a myriad of legal actions they are presently taking to certain deadlines, yet they are still here to do their elected work as councillors. I thank each and every one of you for your dedication to the Kempsey Shire community in this bewildering time. I now commence the meeting with the opening prayer and ask Councillor Patterson.
Dear Lord, help us in our deliberations today so that our decisions will be for the greater good for the whole of the Kempsey Shire. Amen.
Amen. The acknowledgement of country by Councillor Riddington, please.
We all here at Kempsey Shire Council acknowledge the land of the Dunghutti Nations. We pay respect to elders past and present. We acknowledge the role of emerging leaders to continue to guide us in the future. We acknowledge the stolen generations and the need to change practices to be inclusive. This land always was and always will be Dunghutti land.
Thank you, Councillor Riddington and Councillor Patterson. We have any apologies and applications for a leave of absence by councillors? I have received one from Councillor Campbell. Seeking a mover. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, mover. And a second, please. Councillor Riddington. All those in favour? Oh no, anyone voting against accepting? I'll get it right, I'm still learning. Thank you. Carried unanimously. We now move to item 4, which is confirmation of the minutes of our January meeting. And the recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Kempsey Shire Council dated the 25th of January 2022 be confirmed. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bain. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Freeman. Anyone voting against the recommendation of the minutes be accepted? I declare it carried. We now come to disclosures of interest. Do any councillors have a disclosure of interest in any item in the agenda of today's meeting? Councillor Wyatt, please.
I have conflict of interest with item 9.7.
And how are you going to manage that conflict?
Leave.
You leave the room. That's,
yeah.
Thank
it's,
you.
Do I need to say why my interest is? It's not financial.
No,
yeah.
no.
A non-pecuniary interest, yeah.
Yeah.
My
Significant
significant
non-pecuniary.
non-pecuniary interest. Yeah.
That's the
As my
declaration.
former employer.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wyatt. Councillor, we now come to items by exception, which is item 6 on our agenda. There are items there that you, as councillors, may wish to withdraw. You do not need a seconder, and the reasons for withdrawing are you wish to speak against it, or you wish to speak about it to the councillors. So you can speak on it, or you may wish to amend it. So it's not just speaking against it. So anyone wish to withdraw? I'm going to do the withdrawals first. There are the ones left over. I'll ask: are there any questions about the ones remaining? So, are there anyone withdrawing item 8.1 from this? 9.6, the Code of Conduct. Anyone withdrawing 9.7, Point Plomer Road?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that item's already been removed as there's a conflict of interest.
Oh, it has to be. Okay, I apologise. Thank you. 9.9, Statement of Cash and Investments. Anyone wish to withdraw that to ask some interesting questions about finances? No? It stays in. Thank you. And then we have the confidential matters that can be withdrawn from the items by exception. It's 11.1, the legal matters. Anyone wish to withdraw that? Yes?
I'd like to ask some questions on that.
Yes,
so that could be withdrawn.
So it's withdrawn. Yes, we'll withdraw that so you can ask questions in confidential. Anyone have any need to withdraw 11.2, the Devil Nook road cutting tender? No? Thank you. It stays in. Supply and installation of safety barriers, 11.3. Anyone wish to withdraw that tender? Consideration? No? Okay, so only one withdrawn is the legal matters and 9.7. So we now have items passed by exception. I'll need a mover and a seconder, and then we can have questions on the ones remaining in. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Freeman. A seconder, please. Councillor Wyatt, thank you. Are there any questions on any of the items that have been withdrawn to the staff? If not, I will put the recommendation, or now the motion. Anyone voting as an exception against receiving this? You shouldn't be, because you've all said it should be kept. Right, I declare items passed by exception carried. Item 7 is the mayoral minutes. There are none. Then we have, we're moving straight on to 9.1 because the item 8.1 local traffic committee was passed by exception. We're now going to 9.1 Kempsey Shire Biodiversity Strategy 2022 on page 8. There's a recommendation there. There are 3 items in the recommendation. I won't be reading it out. I need a mover. Councillor Patterson, thank you. We'll have a seconder, please. Councillor Wyatt. Would the mover like to speak to the motion, please?
Thank you. The biodiversity plan that had been, sorry, I'm just trying to move my screen, that had been instigated by the previous council and put together by our fantastic staff here at Kempsey Shire Council. This ties in with government, state government legislation I think this is a fantastic opportunity to move forward, showing that our biodiversity and development and the future of the Macleay can all work in one. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? You can speak in favour or against, and you also can ask questions if you wish to ask any questions on the report. So, who would like to speak? Councillor Wyatt had a hand up first. Thank you.
Yep. I would also like to acknowledge the council. This has been a long time in preparation in the early 2000s. I'd like to really acknowledge former council staff that are no longer here that got a lot of it together in the early consultation phase. I'd very much like to acknowledge Director Fisher's current staff, especially the new staff. It's pretty hard to take on somebody else's work and pull it together. So congratulate that staff for pulling it together. I also want to acknowledge that last week we had the koala was declared as an endangered species. So this is quite a bittersweet moment that we have this biodiversity strategy and the koala is an endangered species. Personally, I don't think that's anything to be proud of, that our national iconic species is now an endangered species. I started my career as a young 20-year-old as a koala tour guide looking after injured koalas in Sydney. And just last week, I had a little juvenile koala on my property. So it's really good timing that this biodiversity strategy is here, and I really hope that it's fully embraced and fully funded. I just got a couple of comments in the document as well. I think there's a couple of points stand out to me in this document is one is that of the community comments, there was a lot around issues of land clearing, and I think that showed, and also that the community of greatest input was from Southwest Rocks. I think that's a really clear reflection on what's happening out there, and my understanding of Southwest Rocks as being quite a biodiversity hotspot. So I think we should be, that's in fore of our mind, it's clearly affecting the community of Southwest Rocks. It says that there was 0.17% of community that did provide input into this, and only 3 government departments. I'm not sure how that reflects on how other community plans are engaged, but I think there's a need there that we can increase community appreciation and awareness, and dare I say love, for biodiversity. It is a life force for all of us, and there are ecosystem services that it can deliver. I also think that biodiversity has a right in its own right as an intrinsic value to exist. And one more comment, and that's about it, I think. And the other thing I really urge and I really hope to see is the establishment of a natural resource management committee made up of key industry stakeholders, plus some community representatives from some of those really key hotspots and quite a few community representatives. So yeah, again, thank you for Council for producing it. And I also acknowledge that this biodiversity is sitting on Dungutty and Dungutty land. It's country, it's always will be, always was, always will be. It's Dungutty country, that's where the biodiversity sits. There's an intrinsic link between spiritual and cultural and nature. So, thanks.
Councillor Freeman and then Councillor Riddington. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. I'd just like to second Councillor Wyatt's point on building a love for our natural diversity. I think an important part of that is encouraging people to know how to access our natural environment in a sustainable way through recreation activities. I feel like that could have been covered a little bit better in the community engagement in the 5th section in this biodiversity strategy. And since it's probably not really included to the best level here, I would encourage the councillors to keep an eye out for the follow-down effects of this and try and implement it in further strategies that are affected by this plan. I think that helping or teaching people on how to access the environment in a sustainable way builds a long-term respect and connection for these environments, because at the end of the day, it's the people's love and support that protects these places. We only have a small part to play in it.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Councillor Rington.
Thank you. I too would like to thank the staff and the professionalism with which they've developed this strategy. It's really meaningful to me as a resident of South West Rocks, and I live in Arakoon. And at the moment, we're going through a lot of major developments, and koalas especially are being impacted quite substantially. So I do congratulate the council. From a strategic point of view, this is so meaningful because the operational plans must hang from this. And it's wonderful to have a document that at least we can work from to develop operational plans, and then we can have our milestones and our targets and then evaluate all that and report back on it. So thank you very much for your staff, Robert.
Thank you. And I have a point of order. I don't make point of order, but I have order. Could all those councillors and people in the gallery wear their masks correctly, please? Yes. Unless you're speaking or drinking, you have to keep it on. Thank you very much for supporting the health order. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Bain, please.
I also would like to speak in favour of this motion, commending both the council staff and the previously elected council for the work that was put in developing this strategy. I particularly would like to underline the goals within the strategy for the themes to maintain biodiversity values in Kempsey Shire local government area, not just to maintain the biodiversity values, but to restore them. And these are great things to have. I'm looking forward to working closely with developing the coastal management plan, which will be a very important part of maintaining and restoring those biodiversity values. But also, in the briefing last night, I found out, discovered that by adopting this strategy, we will be opening ourselves to receive government, state and federal funding that is aligned with this, and it's a very, very good time for us to be looking at environmental repair and looking at accessing funding through that path. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Anyone else wish to say something? Councillor Craigie, please.
Thank you, Mayor Horville. I just want to speak in favour of it as well. I see that there's a good opportunity here on terms of this lining in with community engagement policies, and I just see this as a good opportunity to create a positive dialogue between council and the Dunghutti and Thunghutti people of this land. So I just think it'd be good to be mindful of that moving forward. I believe there are some great opportunities here on terms of doing things together. Yeah.
Thank you. No one else wishes to speak. I'll just finish up, and then I will ask the mover to speak and reply if he wants to. One of the things that's impressed me about the biodiversity strategy is the amount of work that's gone on by staff to communicate with the community. And we had 50 community submissions come in, and those submissions all have been addressed by staff. The interesting thing about it is there are a lot of people out there making comments about how they wish to protect the environment, and some of those don't align with the biodiversity strategy. So on page 9 of our agenda, you will see a with scope and a out of scope. All those things out of scope are all very well and plus for the environment, but they fit into other areas of council's operations like the planning department. So the biodiversity strategy is separate from some of the things that people were writing about. Once again, I just commend those people for participating and taking part in developing this strategy. So thank you for listening to my little comment. I'd now ask the mover to speak and reply, please.
Thank you very much. I just have a question before I'd like to finish up, and that would be through Miss General Manager Milburn through to Steve Mitchell, Director Steve Mitchell. Just a short explanation of the costing of this and the impact it will have on any future budget, or is it something that we're budgeted for already based on the environmental levy and the grant funding? And then I'd like to finish.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, I could probably respond to that anyway. Any funding for this will be something that council will adopt as part of the operational plan. So council will be intrinsically involved in actually allocating the budget. There will be a number of sources of funding for it. One of those would be from the environmental levy that council collects around $850,000 a year. So that will certainly be a key source of funding for this. And then there'll be other grant funding opportunities and that sort of thing as well.
Fantastic. And just finishing off, I'd just like to say another congratulations to council for working the this biodiversity strategy with the community, and I look forward to the progress of this in our valley in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. The move and reply is spoken, so there can be no more questions or debate. We now have to put the motion, and I put the motion with the usual practice, which is anyone voting against or dissenting from the motion in front of us. With no one voting against it, I declare it carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. We move now to 9.2, which is on page 19. It's the amendment to the local environment plan for 600 Macleay Valley Way, South Kempsey. There's a recommendation there. It's got 5 points in the recommendation. I have a mover in Councillor Patterson. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Riddington. Councillor Patterson, do you wish to address it, please?
So another great action, I believe, in this area for the Macleay, being that the area needs to focus on bringing business to the Macleay. This is the gateway to our shire. Obviously, this is only a rezoning, so this is not a DA or anything. But this is another step forward for our community in stamping us on the roadmap of Australia with there's so much travelling going on up and down the road, and I'm looking forward to this to come back as a DA, and I look to all my fellow councillors for support on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I ask for any questions, I'd like to ask a very simple question. Could councillors and the gallery be informed of what this actually change of use means and why it's not a DA yet?
Mr. Fish.
Yeah, through the Mayor. So this particular planning proposal relates to an additional permitted use on the particular lot of land. So currently the land is zoned RU2 rural landscape. The planning proposal seeks to have added to the permissible uses a service centre. So at the moment that's a prohibited land use on that particular site, but with the planning proposal that will obviously seek to have that as a permitted use with consent. So this planning proposal has been put forward a couple of times now and is contingent on the planning agreement being agreed upon, and subject to that occurring, we would then do the making of the plan, which is the changes to the local environmental plan. The applicant may move to the development application stage soon after the rezoning process.
Thank you, Director Fish. Do we have any questions or anyone wish to speak in favour or against the motion. Councillor Wyatt, please.
I have two questions, or two statements, questions. Just a confirmation that allowing this permitted use in this particular block of land in the LEP does not set precedent for other land use, other zones of the same classification throughout the Shire. So this is a one-off just for this block.
Yes, that's correct. So
Director Fish, yes.
sorry. Yes, that's correct. That's adding. It's just adding the permissible use to this lot alone, not any others. And should anyone else want to make a similar change at a different location, it would require a planning proposal as well, and obviously the necessary assessment that goes in behind that.
Thank you. And my second question is around, so the recommendation is to approve the general manager to sign off on this to take it to that volunteer planning agreement. Is that correct? And
through the mayor. So,
sorry.
Yeah. Yes. So the following, if the council resolves in line with the recommendation, that provides ability for the general manager to execute the voluntary planning agreement, and then there's a subsequent steps from 2 to 5 in the recommendation, which would then flow on from that, which effectively make the change to the local environmental plan.
Thank you. And one follow-up to that, if I may, and the consequences if we do not approve this delegation today.
Well, if council were to not make a decision, the department has made it clear that they will make a decision come the 21st of March, when the the period that was outlined in the gateway was listed by the department. If council were not to support it, then the proponent could seek to obviously challenge that.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Councillor Bain and then Councillor Patterson.
I'm just having a look at the property on 6 maps. So to be clear, it's the property directly to the north of the South Kempsey roundabout, where you come off the highway. It's to the north of the roundabout. Yeah. Yep. And it's got a lot of building on that property. It's got a lot of machinery. I think most people will be aware of that. I can see absolutely no issue in rezoning that. I don't think there'll be any impact on. There'll be no impact on habitat or any environmental values. So yeah, I will be supporting. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Sorry, my computer just doesn't recognise me.
Order. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. You're asking a question because as a mover, you get to speak at the end. Yep. Thank you.
Yep. So it was just in relation to the biodiversity plan that we just acknowledged and passed. What effect will that biodiversity plan have on this development, Mr. Fish?
Yeah, through the mayor, the biodiversity plan strategy, identifies some principles which will then potentially inform our key planning instruments, being our local environmental plan, development control plan, and also, the local area planning that we do. It's an indirect link to any sites across the Shire, and potentially including this one. But ultimately, the framework that our planners assess things by are those key instruments being the local environmental plan and the development control plan, and any relevant state or federal legislation that's in place.
Thank you, Director Fish. Do we have any other questions or speaking in favour or against the motion? No? Right. I will then be putting the motion after the move and reply had the right to reply.
Thank you. Once again, I'd just like to reiterate the fact that this site has been utilised by a family business for many years and has laid dormant for quite a while because of the family moving on, passing on. So as a gateway to our town, it'll be great to see a new bright development that people will see before they think to turn off and go onto the highway through to through the Coffs Harbour direction. But and I'm looking forward to see the influence of the new biodiversity plan on this site as well. Thank you. I commend this to my fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I'll now put the motion, and I'll be putting the motion with anyone dissenting or voting against the motion moved by Councillor Patterson. I declare it carried unanimously. We now move to the next item on our schedule, which is the delivery plan. It's on our delivery program operational plan 2021, second quarter progress report. It's on page 25. Interesting big numbers there, if you want to look at it in the gallery. We are dealing with big numbers and very responsibly too. I'm now asking anyone who wishes to move the recommendation that's before us. Councillor Bain. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Riddington. Councillor Bain, do you wish to speak to the motion that's before us, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak in support of this motion, as we learned at the briefing last night that there are constraints on the current operations at the Crescent Head Waste Management, and that there needs to be the development of Cell 4, and that is essential with the increasing amount of waste that the council are having to process, but also the balancing that with the space that we've got to put it. The reduction of the budget for the road and leachate is compatible with the increase, because it will be the issues there will be addressed through the development of Waste Cell 4. I'd like to thank the council staff for the great work they've done in preparing these budgets, and in the forward-thinking way that the budgets are being developed for the next financial year, and a very thorough briefing. Thank you very much to the council staff, and that's about all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, thank you. We can have people speaking for, against, or they might wish to ask a question. You might have asked a question at the briefing, but you think it's important to be asked in front of the public gallery. You can also ask that question again. Councillor Riddington, please.
I'd like to commend this motion to my fellow councillors. The briefing last night was extremely thorough and really professional. I'd especially like to thank, I'm going to have to use her first name because I don't know her second. Yeah, can you just put that in? She did a fantastic job, because I've done a fair bit of work, as I said last night, with the EPA, and it's very, very important that we maintain very good relationship with the EPA, and that's very obvious. I understand the budget increase. I understand the liner for Cell 4, and I think that will be a better way to move, even though it's more expensive, and I commend this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riddington. Councillor Freeman, please.
Yeah. What are the plans after Cell 4? What's the time? What's the life expectancy on Cell 4? And then what are the plans after Cell 4?
Get Mr. Mitchell to respond.
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. So once Cell 4 is completed, we should get in the vicinity of about 5 years landfill capacity out of that cell. Then there is scope for a Cell 5. Which will happen on that existing footprint. So you may recall the map that we showed last night would have capacity within that existing footprint for another cell. Beyond that, we are now commencing a whole lot of strategic planning around the future sort of waste requirements and what we do on that site. And so we've sort of got, the best part of sort of 8 to 10 years on the existing site before we either need to consider alternative sites or expansion at that site. So that work is obviously critical and commencing now.
Do we have any other person wishing to ask a question, speak for, against the motion before us? Councillor Wyatt.
I just have a comment on the waste management facility as well. It's very much a catch-22 situation, is that we love our waste and we're increasing our waste, and we need to look at how we manage waste in the future. And consequent to that is fees and charges are increasing because of the environmental impacts associated with waste. So we do need to look, we're coming to that point in support of what you're saying, to where we need to look at how we manage waste better, not only in terms of landfill, but packaging, products, disposal, all sorts of things. So I think that's catch-22. We have to spend this money for licensing, and because we love our waste. So it's a big picture issue.
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt. Anyone else wish to speak? If not, I will put the motion. We have a late starter here, and Councillor Bain. Yes, Councillor Bain.
As the mover, I believe I'm entitled to speak.
Yes, I apologise. I should have called for you to speak again. Thank you.
Again, I would like to commend the work of the staff on looking at the the projected budget surplus at the end of the financial year of 0.6 million, and note that the funding through disaster recovery has had a positive impact on that budget. Again, referring to waste, I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Wyatt said. There's an opportunity for increasing waste education, but also for adopting processes like banning of single-use plastics and cost shifting to producers of overpackaged materials. So I think that'll be hand in hand with acknowledging that we need to create more space to store our waste, or to safely manage our waste. We also need to look at the strategies for reducing the production of waste. And I would like to commend that a budget approval to my fellow councillors. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. There's a move in reply. Thank you for that. I now put the motion, and again, is there any dissent on the motion before us? The General Manager doesn't get a vote. He was scratching his head, sorry. Thank you. I declare the motion carried unanimously. We now move to item 9.4, which is a review of committees and appointments of delegates. Page 39. And the recommendations there before you. I'll need a mover. Councillor Patterson, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Freeman. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, this recommendation is something that we need to be doing on I believe, on an annual basis, and we're obviously going to dissolve a couple of committees. In the briefing session last night, we were told for those reasons why. Could I just ask, through the General Manager, if he could give us a quick rundown on 4, 5 and 6?
Madam Mayor. Old habits, my apologies, Mr. Mayor. Very old habits. That's what happens when you have 4 years of saying the same thing all the time. Number 4, the Economic Development and Tourism Committee was actually set up to develop the economic and tourism strategy. It was at a very specific purpose to provide the direction to the development of those documents. The committee has actually done that and done that task very, very well. Therefore, there is no need for that to still there, and it certainly hasn't met any time in the last 12 months or more, actually probably a lot longer. The Gladstone Tennis Club, the tennis club, and in relation to Smithtown as well, there's been no bookings. The school no longer uses the tennis club. It's actually quite overgrown and is not maintained at all. There's been no interest from the community to do that, so it's being looked at by our properties and facilities. So therefore, there's no need for a committee to be managing something that isn't being utilised. The Smithtown Hall Committee was disbanded in 2018 due to the age and ill health of the committee members at the time. We've tried to recruit new members and haven't had any success in doing that. It's not being used, and therefore there's no income from it, and it's being looked after by our properties and facilities team. The other consideration, if we do take bookings there and they're after hour bookings, then we've got to arrange obviously for our staff to be there after hours, and also for inspections before and after, and for the cleaning of the facility as well. So it's not being used where it may get booked, then we can actually manage that from our staff point of view.
Thank you. Any other speakers for or against or asking a question? Before I put the motion, I'll come back to Councillor Patterson if he wishes to speak to it. But item 2 in the motion is that we will hold any election required for membership by open voting. If we pass this, that's what will then be occurring here in the meeting, and that might take some time. Any questions or comments further? Councillor Wyatt, please.
Just a newbie question because I don't understand. Are we actually going to have a discussion about this, or do we need to move to the meeting of the whole committee, whatever that's
Committee
called?
of the whole, if
Committee of the
possible,
whole
yes.
to
We need a
discuss
mover of that, but first of all, we need to pass the motion.
Righto. Thank you.
Or defeat it. I can't predict. Okay. Anyone dissenting on the motion, voting against the motion put by Councillor Patterson? I declare it carried unanimously, and I'll now take Councillor Wyatt moving that we go into Committee of the Whole. Is that what you're doing? Yes. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Bain. I put the motion. Anyone voting against it? No. I will now move into the Committee of the Whole. It's carried. And first item is, first committee on our list is the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. We need to appoint an observer. That's the new regulation. That's not a voting delegate, but we need an observer, and the Mayor may not be that observer. So anyone wish to put their hand up who would like to be the observer on the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee? Councillor Freeman is one.
Can I nominate someone?
Yeah. Oh, you can nominate, or you can nominate yourself. So
I'd like to nominate Mayor Riddington.
Councillor Riddington.
Sorry. Councillor Riddington.
Thank you very much. Do you accept the nomination, Councillor Riddington? Thank you. Yeah, we'll see if there's any other people jumping out of the guns wanting to have a go. Councillor Wyatt?
No, I'm not nominating. Yeah. Can we just have a little bit of a brief description of what this committee is about?
Yeah, I'll get Mr. Mitchell to outline that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor, so our Audit and Risk Committee has been in existence for about 3 years. There's now a requirement under the LG guidelines for all councils to have an Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. Essentially plays a key corporate governance role for us. So we'll consider from a financial perspective our financial statements, so plays a really critical role in terms of the oversight of the preparation and audit of our annual financial statements. Also receives a number of reports from our internal auditor. So our internal auditor has a plan which the Audit and Risk Committee will approve, a 3-year plan with a real focus on the first year of that. And there's in the vicinity of around about eight audits that are undertaken, internal audits every year. And those audit reports are reported through to the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee to have oversight of those. So they obviously will identify any areas of control weakness which are obviously graded in terms of their level of risk. And so the Audit Risk Improvement Committee oversees that. They also, quite importantly, oversee our risk management. And so there's regular updates that we provide to ARIC around our risk management. So from a corporate strategic risk management plan perspective, legislative compliance. So very much around those corporate governance aspects that they play a key role. And by having independent committee members, so we'll have 3 once we complete the expression of interest that's currently underway. They bring certain levels of expertise and independence to make sure that that those corporate governance frameworks and processes and controls are in place, and that our financial statements are prepared in a way that reflects our financial position, which are then obviously subject to audit. The role of the appointed or elected councillor observer. This is a change that's come on the back of the OLG guidelines. So we will have 3 independent ARIC committee members, but we'll also have a council observer, not in a voting capacity, but it's a way for us to actually have sort of that connection between the independent committee and the elected councillors. And so they'll act as almost like as a conduit back between the two, whilst Director Fish, the General Manager and myself are all present at each of those ARIC committee meetings. It is good to have a councillor there, and previously Councillor McGinn played that role, and so if there's any questions that come up in council meeting in terms of business that's being dealt with at the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, there's a councillor who can then contextualise that for the benefit of the other councillors. That sort of role has its changed role compared to the role that Councillor McGinn held. In terms of the requirements of this role for whoever's elected as the council this time, but a very important role nonetheless.
And could I follow up, Director Mitchell? The observer would also be able to ask questions. It's not just sitting and watching from behind sort of thing.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's correct. But I mean, obviously, the voting on it and in terms of any agenda items are before are in relation to the independent committee members.
Thank you. Councillor Bain.
My question would be, one is how many meetings are there a year, and is there an opportunity to be an alternate? Can we have like a councillor elected and an alternate?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, there's 5 meetings a year, 4 sort of general sort of standard meetings. The 5th meeting is largely to deal with the annual financial statements. I think if you're proposing, Councillor Bain, to have sort of a rotation through there, I'd probably suggest no. We're actually looking for one member, one councillor to play that observer role. You'll be receiving a paper next month that will actually have a lot of the new charter, etc., around the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee. It was only received and considered at the ARIC meeting last week, where we've actually got a skills matrix for our independent members, but also for our councillor observers. So we're actually looking for the councillor observer to have certain skill sets as well that can contribute to those meetings. And I think my personal opinion would be if you're rotating someone through, it would be a bit disruptive to the flow from meeting to meeting.
That's a question.
Councillor Craigie, please.
So just correct me if my assumption is correct. So I'm assuming that whichever councillor is involved in this committee, they will be part of the discussions. They're able to express their own concerns or ideas. They can be part of debate, same as anyone else, except for voting.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, Councillor Craigie. Not dissimilar to the roles that any of the 2 directors and the general manager on that committee.
Right. Any other questions? We need any other, or are there any other nominations? We only have 1 at the moment, and Councillor Riddington is still considering.
No, I'm happy to accept that now that Director Mitchell has explained it to me. I do have quite good skills in that area, okay. Except I would rely on you for the dollars, but the rest of it I can handle.
Okay. So if we have no other nominations, anyone else wishing to take on the role? Councillor Wyatt.
No, but I support you taking on that role. I agree. I don't know you that well, but I agree that I think you have those skills in your previous employment.
Right. Thank you very much. Councillor Riddington, congratulations being elected as the observer on the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. In keeping with the theme of having Councillor Riddington involved, the Australia Day Awards Committee, just so that you all are aware of this, councillors, we had a Australia Day committee meeting last Friday, and we debated the report that will be coming back to March Council, and the committee agreed that we need the experience from Councillor Riddington and Councillor Campbell on that committee. Previously, we only had one councillor elected as well as the mayor, and the recommendation from that committee is that we elect two councillors, and the two councillors being Councillor Riddington and Councillor Campbell. But if someone else wishes to nominate, that could also occur. We'd need a vote on it then. But the committee is also looking to replace 3 people that are no longer on the committee for various reasons. It's a 5-year appointment, and it's got 3 years to run, I think, Councillor Riddington. So we will be seeking expressions of interest after the March Council meeting on new community members on that committee. But today we can nominate and accept 2 councillor nominations, and I'm putting forward Councillor Riddington and Councillor Campbell. But if someone else wishes to nominate or nominate someone else, this is your time to speak. Councillor Freeman?
Can I ask a question?
For sure.
How long is the term, sorry, for this?
For Councillor Riddington?
I've been on this committee for 3 years now, Councillor Freeman. I think it's a 5-year term, so I'm assuming there's 2 years to go.
2 years, okay.
Through Madam Mayor, no. Based on what council has already resolved, these committees are reviewed again at the first meeting after the 31st of August. Yeah, so they'll be reviewed again at that point from the councillor reps.
Oh, sorry, that was just me being a private citizen person.
The committee will keep running.
The committee will keep running, yes. No, the committee keeps running, but the actual council reps, with the resolution you made, that in point 3, if you want to remake the appointment to the first ordinary meeting after the 31st of August, that's how we get back on that cycle with the elections.
Yes.
And then those ones in the September meeting this year would be there for 2 years to actually link you through to the September 2024 council election.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. So we have 2 nominations. If there are no other nominations, I declare Councillors Campbell and Riddington elected to the Australia Day Awards Committee.
Could I just ask a question on that?
For sure. Councillor Patterson.
Just checking, did Councillor Campbell okay that nomination?
Yes, she did. She was at the committee meeting on Friday. Thanks.
No, Councillor Patterson, Councillor
Riddington.
did. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Riddington, you wish to speak.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Patterson, yes, she was there and we all talked about it. It was very open. Sorry.
Thank you. We now come to external committees. The Bushfire Management Committee and Zone Liaison Committee. Previously we had Councillor Morris and Councillor Saul as an alternate. This time we need a councillor to attend those. We can have self-nominations and we can have nominations for other councillors if you wish. I see Councillor Baines' light is on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to self-nominate for that position. I have been on that committee for a period of time as a representative of the Nature Conservation Council. If appointed by council, I will resign that seat as Nature Conservation Council, and I would much prefer to be there as a representative of council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Do we have any other nominations to be on the Bushfire Management Committee and Zone Liaison Committee? Councillor Wyatt?
I don't nominate, but I have a question. Are we allowed to put alternatives to these? Yeah. So can we put alternatives to these? To this
Alternate
one?
Delegate. Councillor, Mr. General Manager?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, you could put an alternative on this.
Could I please?
Councillor Riddington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that Councillor Ferguson is also in the bushfire thing. I would just like to ask your thoughts on that. You don't want to nominate, or?
I was actually thinking
Councillor Ferguson, a question through me to you.
Yeah, through
From
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Whittington is how it goes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I was actually thinking that I'd probably try and get to most of those meetings anyway, even just to observe, as I haven't been involved before. So that was my intention on that one.
So you'll be happy to be an alternate?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Councillor Whittington, yes.
Mr. Mayor, again, I'd like to support Councillor Bain in his nomination, and I'd also support Councillor Ferguson if he's going to go as well. That would be wonderful.
Alternate, okay.
Thank you.
We have other nominations. No, Councillor White, please.
Oh, sorry. You can go.
I was...
Councillor Craigie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was thinking to nominate... can you nominate more than one person at once? Yeah.
We only want one person elected, but you're going to nominate an alternate, and we don't have to vote. But yes, you can nominate someone, Councillor Craigie.
Okay. So I was going to... my original thought was to nominate Councillor Bain and Councillor Ferguson. I believe both are great for the job, and I believe from my discussions with fellow councillors that they have between them the most experience.
Thank you, Councillor Craigie. There's no other nominations. So the nominations are...
I was just going to support that. And maybe...
Councillor White, thank you.
I think we need more lessons in how to conduct ourselves in meetings. Many apologies. We will get better at this, I'm sure. Please, I'm really sorry. Yeah, I was going to support that too. I'm really happy for those two, and just a little bit of a dispute. I mean, point of order. I've been involved in bushfire management for 30 years as well. I don't want to be on this committee. I don't think it would be appropriate, but I'm really happy to support the Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Bain on this committee. I agree, they will be excellent.
Thank you.
I'll put just a question.
Through Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify after Councillor Craigie's comments, have we got two nominations, or have we got a nomination for Councillor Bain and then Councillor Ferguson as the alternate? Is that what we've got?
That's what I read, Mr. General Manager. Is that what you wanted, Councillor?
Because you can only have one rep on it, and then there's an alternate. But what I understood Councillor Craigie was doing, he was nominating both. But if that's the case, he will then have to have a vote.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to clarify if we got a single nomination for Councillor Bain and the nomination for Councillor Ferguson as the alternate, or do we have two nominations for the one rep, which requires a vote?
Well, I'll rule that that's what the intention was, that Councillor Bain was to be the nominated person and Councillor Ferguson was to be the alternate. Anyone wish to dispute that? If not, I'll rule that that is the nominations, and no further nominations are being put forward. I declare Councillor Bain our delegate and the alternate delegate, Councillor Ferguson.
Can I ask, Mr. Mayor?
Question from Councillor Patterson.
Can I just get a little bit of an update on Committee of a Whole, because I understand we're in the Committee of a Whole at the moment. I'm just not quite sure on what standards that's going to be held up to, as far as, like you can't talk until he talks or whatever, because I believe in the Committee of a Whole it was a lot more free-flowing. But I'm just asking you that question.
Yes, thank you. My understanding, Councillor Patterson, it's still having the respect and rules of a council discussion, but there's no restraint on comments or questions or what you are nominating.
And once again, I thought we weren't allowed to vote in a Committee of a Whole. We had to go back into open council to vote.
Yeah.
Well, what will happen, we'll go back into the open council meeting and we'll vote to accept what happened in the Committee of the Whole. Is that what has happened in the past?
Yeah, what we'll need to do is...
Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, what we're doing, what Daniel and I are doing here, we'll keep a record of what nominations you've actually had. And then that will need to be a recommendation from the committee of the whole to council. Yes. And when you go back into council, you'll adopt the recommendation of the committee of the whole. So it'll just be a process which we haven't done before as formally as that in my time here. But for this purpose, that's the best way to actually do it.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager, for the clarification. I hope everyone understands. Do you have a question for the General Manager on that? No, pretty clear. Thank you very much. We then come to the Club Grants Committee, and in the past it's been the Mayor or the Deputy Mayor as an alternate. Mr. General Manager, can that be varied, or is that just normal that the Mayor is on?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that can be varied.
I'm happy to do it as the Mayor, but if anyone wishes to nominate or be a delegate as a alternate, Councillor Wyatt, please.
I just have a question. What does this committee do? Obviously, it devolves grants out of poker machine takings, but how much are we looking at? What kind of grants are they?
Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, Mr. Mitchell may be able to answer a bit more of this, but yeah, it is actually from the registered clubs. It's through the Registered Clubs Act. They have to provide a percentage of their funding to community grants programs. The amount will vary depending on some decisions they make. They have a range of flexibilities on what they can actually do. And then they go through a process through this club's grants process as well. I'm not sure if Mr. Mitchell knows the actual value of them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I don't have a huge amount to add. I mean, the amount has been smaller in recent years, and I guess there's and council's role has become lesser, I guess, in terms of that, and as to whether that's something that the clubs could potentially run themselves. But at the moment, and past practice has been that the mayor or the deputy mayor as alternate has participated in that committee.
I would like to ask a question.
Councillor Craigie, just put your light on and I'll name you. Thank you. Yep. Would you be able to give me an understanding of some of the highlights of this committee? What are the achievements over the last term, and where do you hope it to go into the future?
Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. General Manager.
In 2018, there was 30 grants distributed, totaling a sum of around $50,000. So there's relatively small grants across a whole range of different community and sporting groups across the Shire. It is an external committee, so there's only certain influence council has on it because it's actually made up of other community and club representatives. So we need to be careful of our expectations of it. But it is a range of small grants that get distributed across the community pretty broadly. And Mr. General Manager, they are presented here usually in a council meeting? No? No, it's an external committee. Okay. The council doesn't actually get any final say on the distribution of those at all. It's just you have a councillor rep on there as a single voting person on how they actually assess those grants. Thank you, Mr. General Manager. I hope that's clear to everyone. If someone else wishes to nominate, I'm quite happy to do the job as the mayoral position on the committee, but if someone else thinks they would like to be on that committee. If not, I will take the job on. Thank you very much. We now come to the local traffic committee. At the present time, Councillor Patterson, you're still on that committee as a representative of our local member. So you, as deputy mayor, you weren't on the 2 terms you were deputy mayor, you weren't on the committee as deputy mayor. You were still Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams was, yes, just so that everyone here understands that it says deputy mayor on the local traffic committee in the agenda, but that was 3 years previously. But before that, the mayor was on the committee and was the chair, I believe, of that committee. I'm happy to accept the role again as mayor. If someone else wishes to nominate as a council rep on the traffic committee. We don't have anyone. Thank you. I'll
Could you nominate people? I'd nominate Kerry Riddington.
So I'll name Councillor Patterson, who wishes to nominate someone. Thank you.
I'd nominate Councillor Riddington.
Councillor Riddington, do you accept that?
Thank you. Another one. Again, how many times does this one meet, please, Mr. General Manager?
Mr. Fish.
It's basically every 3 months this committee meets, I think, so it's 4 times a year from memory.
Yeah, okay, because I think I've got big issues and I'd like to probably be on it. So thank you, Councillor Patterson.
I'm not talking about your driving ability.
Maybe you should. I drive pretty fast.
Right. Yeah, Councillor, Director Fish, please.
Yeah, just to clarify in terms of this particular committee, so the committee is made up of a representative of council, representative of police, representative of the Transport for New South Wales, and the local state member or their nominee. The committee relates really to the regulation of traffic functions that council's delegated to do for the local road network. So the committee itself has no decision-making powers. It's primarily a technical review committee, which is required to advise council on matters referred to it by council. So these matters must be related to prescribed traffic control devices and traffic control facilities for which council has delegated authority. The committee considers the technical merits of the proposed and ensures the proposal meets current technical guidelines. So the council, as I said, refers the matters to the committee for, I guess, their input and a recommendation, and then they are then implemented by the council, obviously following ultimately adoption of the minutes by council. So it is quite the focus is on what those delegations that council has for the local road network, and it's important that the committee remains, I guess, focused on those particular delegations.
Director Fish, in the past, who has been the chair of this committee?
So the councillor that goes on the committee from today will chair those meetings with assistance, obviously, from our staffing rep who attends that meeting.
I'll just add to that,
Mr. General Manager, and then Councillor Patterson.
Yeah, the committee's obviously been a long-standing. They're actually across all the various regions. There is no requirement under the guidelines that the councillor has to be on the committee. And I know where a councillor hasn't been, said Mr. Cliff Toms is our rep on there, and he has taken that role, I think, of chairing that meeting for a fair while at the moment because of his expertise in that area. So councillors can be on it, but it's not necessarily they do have to be on it either. So it is a choice of the council.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to just give you a little quick overview of things that I believe have achieved on the traffic committee. Many years ago, I purchased property out Spooners Avenue, and when you turn off River Street, it used to be 100 kilometres an hour speedway, and I brought that to the notice of the traffic committee, and the traffic committee ended up putting a recommendation into the RMS, and the RMS done a study on it, and the speed limit was dropped down to 80 kilometres an hour. And also, I noticed that the Hadhead Road off South West Rocks Road, through past all the houses until it got to the farms, until it gets to the national park there, it used to be 100 kilometres an hour too. And I challenged the Roads and Traffic Authority representative to have a drive on that road at those speeds, and once again we put the recommendation through, and that was lowered. And also the road that goes from that goes from Smithtown on this side of the road down to Summer Island Road, and I also challenged that same thing there. So to be able to be big thing being a local of the area and driving around and seeing those traffic issues, and then bringing it to the traffic committee that then brings a recommendation to council. But to get back to here, you know, we have the cooperation of council's staff. We have a highway patrol officer on the committee as well, and a RMS representative, and it's been very, very productive I think I've been on there for 9 years now.
Excuse me.
Thank you, Councillor Riddington.
Thank you. I'd like to commend Councillor Patterson and his contribution to the Traffic Committee. I think it's been really, really meaningful, and I thank you very much. Also, I'm interested too, because when I read all the paperwork, there is that handicap spot at Southwest Rocks that we really need to look at. There's a few issues, so thank you for your nomination, and I accept it.
Thank you, Councillor Riddington. As a self-nominated person to be on the committee, I would ask the Mr. General Manager, if there's no other nominations, to run a vote on who we elect. Please, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have the two nominations, one being Mayor Horville, another one being Councillor Riddington. I'll be going to ask for a show of hands, so if you could put your hands up very, very high so I can actually see those as we go. And as is our practice, we'll take these in the order of nominations. We did receive Councillor Mayor Horville's nomination first. He expressed a desire at the commencement of this. So for those who wish to support Mayor Horville as the representatives, could you please raise your hands? 2, 3, 4. Okay. And those supporting Councillor Riddington, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. The Mayor has the casting vote.
Thank you. Thank you. And
just hold up a moment. Let me check the regulation.
Yes,
I think we have to draw it
no
out the hat.
dispersions on Councillor Riddington.
Yeah, I think
my casting vote will be for me.
Yeah, we just check and we think we actually on this have to draw it out the hat. We just double check the
We
regulation.
need a hat first. Thank you.
You're right. Fairly certain where there is a time in election. Quite a lot. So the general form that is followed where there is an election of councillors, unless it's specified otherwise, is to follow the regulations in the Act for the election of a mayor or a chairperson. Where there is a show of hands, each councillor votes for one candidate. Sorry. In the event of a tied vote, the returning officer will advise the meeting of the process in accordance with Clause 12 of Schedule 7 of the Local Government General Regulation. I will now write the names of the candidates on similar slips of paper, fold them and place them in the barrel. Please note the candidate whose name is drawn out will be declared.
Where's the barrel? Barrel hat, please. Roll out the barrel.
We're still in the whole. I just want to ask a question. With the outcome, are we allowed to object?
No, it will be a final decision, whatever the name on the hat coming out.
You would need to file a rescission motion at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Councillor Riddington. We now move on to the Melville Hall Sport and Entertainment Centre Management Committee. We, in the past, had Councillor Campbell on, and then I was elected onto it, and we had an alternate, Councillor Morris. We need one person elected. If you've read the story that goes with this committee, you know that we voted 2 years ago on a Merrill minute that we withdraw from the committee, but the Department of Education, who has management of the Melville Hall site, their legal advice has not been forthcoming to dissolve the committee. So the committee continues, so we need one person to be on that committee. Do we have any nominations, please?
Can I ask a question on that one too? What is the actual role on that committee? Apart from the obvious, I mean,
Well,
how often does it meet? What do you do?
I can answer that, Councillor Wyatt, thank you. The committee manages the operations of the community hall. It organises and manages the bookings. It takes money for the bookings and uses the money to maintain the community hall. Back in 1986, was it? Council put in a huge amount of money when they were establishing that. It would have been about $2 or $3 million in today's money into that hall. It's a very valuable asset in our community. It's very valuable for Melville High School and their students, and it has many community uses. But it in recent years, the Education Department doing most of the work on maintaining it, and the committee was established and has a sunset clause of 2036, and that time it will be wholly owned by the Department of Education. But at the moment, we're supposed to have someone on that committee, so we need a nomination to someone to attend that, and there's probably 2 meetings a year. Councillor Wyatt?
Mayor Helver, are you happy to be nominated? Would you like to be nominated? I'll nominate you.
Thank you. Yes, I've been on the committee. I will accept that. Any other nominations? Okay, thank you. I seem to be elected. We then have the next committee, the Mid-North Coast Regional Arts Board. Councillor Baxter was previously on that board, and it meets 2 or 3 years times a year and covers the whole region. And we need one person to be nominated for it. Councillor Bain.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Campbell. I spoke with her prior to her being on leave, and she indicated that she would have an interest in that. So I'd like to nominate Councillor Campbell.
Second that nomination as well, after speaking to Liz as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other nominations? Councillor Riddington, your light's on.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to support that wholeheartedly. I have myself spoken to Councillor Campbell, and I think she'd be an asset to that committee.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for that North Coast Regional Arts Committee?
Sorry.
Councillor Wyatt?
I'll support Liz's nomination.
Councillor Campbell.
I'll support Councillor Campbell's nomination. I wish she was here because I would like to see what she actually feels, because I am very interested in the arts. I would maybe like to attend the meetings with her or as an alternative. So I won't nominate, but I am very passionate about bringing more art facilities to the Mid-North Coast, but I'm happy to support Councillor Campbell not as long as, but I would really much like to be involved in that committee too.
Mr. General Manager, may I ask, can Councillor White be an alternate and attend as well, just in case?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't see an issue with Councillor White being nominated as an alternate to that. We do have a staff member attend these as well. And certainly, Councillor Campbell expressed her interest in this to me as well. So we'll just have to make sure we don't get overloaded. But I think the key thing is, having talked to some of the councillors during the induction, there's obviously a keen interest from a lot of you about the arts and culture in the community. So I think there's been an opportunity for a lot of you to be involved in various areas going forward as well.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Do we have any other questions or comments? Councillor White.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree that Councillor Campbell will be an asset to that committee. And I know I won't have voting delegation or anything like that. I'm just happy to be involved. Thanks.
Well, you may have to vote if you are an alternate and Councillor Campbell can't attend. But are there any other nominations or not? I will accept that Councillor Campbell has been elected and Councillor Wyatt is the alternate. Anyone dissenting on that? I declare that as is. Final two, Public Libraries Association North East Zone Committee, and Councillor Morris was on that committee, and obviously it's to support public libraries in our area. We need more funding all the time for our libraries. Councillor Bain.
I would self-nominate for that if no one else wants to take it. I'm not overly attached to it, but I do have an interest in public literacy and public libraries.
Do we have any other nominations? Councillor Riddington.
No, I've got too many.
Too many libraries.
I wish I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would wholeheartedly support Councillor Bain, but like Councillor Wyatt, I'd like to be an alternative because I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in literature, and I really love books and I really support our local libraries. So if that would be okay through the General Manager, I would appreciate that.
Is that okay, Mr. General Manager, under the setting up of that committee?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that one I'm not 100% sure whether they allow an alternate with that. I'd have to take that on notice and come back, I think. Yep. Well, let's take it as an alternate, and then if it's not permitted, we'll reverse it in September.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've got Councillor Bain nominated as the delegate and Councillor Riddington as the alternate. Is there any dissent on that decision? They're both of them elected, thank you, not electrocuted, thank you. The final one on our list is the South West Rocks Sport and Recreation Club, and previously we had Councillor Shield and Councillor Williams as an alternate, and that association has a lot of work to do in the next few years with the new stadium coming online and lots of sport happening at South West Rocks. So do we have any nominations, please?
I'd like to nominate.
I saw Councillor Craigie first. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to nominate Councillor Freeman.
Councillor Freeman, you accept that nomination?
I'm honoured to be nominated, but considering this is the start of my councillor journey, I would like to turn it down for this term, but I would be interested in next term.
That you decline. Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Do we have another nomination? Councillor Patterson.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Riddington, thank you, even though she's her book's full, but I'm sure she'd enjoy the South West Rocks opportunity.
Councillor Riddington, do you accept?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Patterson. I do accept that nomination. I'm happy to accept it. We do have a lot to do.
You sure do.
And it's very exciting.
Thank you.
Nominate as alternative.
We have one nomination, and Councillor Patterson's light is on. Do you have an alternate?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate for the alternate. Thank you.
Yourself?
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
self-nominate.
Thank you. We have an alternate nomination, so we've got Councillor Riddington as the delegate and an alternate in Councillor Patterson. Do we have any other nominations?
So,
question or comment from Councillor Freeman?
Yep. So how often do they meet?
I don't know.
They meet reasonably regularly. I'm not sure they actually have a set, monthly or bi-monthly meeting, but they do meet fairly regularly, which I'd anticipate you'd be meeting, every 4 to 8 weeks with this group.
Thank you.
Excuse me, through Mr. General Manager, they're a very active group.
Councillor Riddington?
Sorry.
You're on.
Through you, Mr. General Manager, they're a very active group, Councillor Freeman, and it's a really good group. You might like to think about it next time.
Councillor Riddington, thank you. Councillor Craigie?
Yes, I'd just like to clarify what's the length of the term.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, for this particular nomination, it's through till when Council reconsider these, which will be in September later this year. Yeah, so all the ones that you're appointing now will be reconsidered in September.
Thank you, Councillor Craigie, for the question. Do we have any other nominations for the South West Rocks Sport and Recreation Association? If not, I'll declare elected Councillor Riddington and Councillor Patterson as alternate. There are no other items on the agenda for these committees, Mr. General Manager. So the Public Facility Management Committees, we don't need anyone on those.
Correct.
So we declare that item closed. The Code of Meeting Practice will be the next one.
You'll need to now move back into ordinary.
We can just,
of course.
if you can just give me a moment to finish putting together the recommendation of the committee so councillors know what they're resolving when we move back out of committee of the whole.
Yes.
Right, we'll hold the meeting for a few moments, and as soon as we've done that and come out of the committee of the whole, we will move the recommendation that comes from the committee of the whole and vote on that. And then we'll be adjourning for morning tea. Councillor Bain?
Is it appropriate for me now to move that we move out of committee of the whole?
If Councillor, Mr. Thorogood's ready.
I was about to say, just before we do councillors agree that this is the recommendation that the committee of the whole has formulated for council to adopt?
Yes, well, I can put that, Mr. Thorogood, when it comes out.
You can't change it then?
Yep.
So if I'm wrong, after you moved out, you can't change it. So
we could amend it.
You could.
Yeah,
we need to know the recommendation is what the committee.
Okay, so everyone's looking at what's on the screen and considering what's there, and if there's anything that needs correcting, we need to do it now before we come out of the committee of the whole. Councillor Wyatt?
A clarification, what was the bit about and the delegate be approved to sub-delegate on the...
The guideline for the local traffic committee requires that there be an approval from council for the delegate to allow somebody else to vote. So the local traffic committee is, I guess, generally reasonably informal in some ways in the way their meetings are run. For instance, Councillor Patterson attends on behalf of the local member, Melinda Pavey. In the event that Kerry can't make it to a meeting and says, Councillor Horville, would you like to go in my place? That needs to be pre-approved by council that she can sub-delegate.
So we don't appoint a sub-delegate, it's just as on an as-needs basis?
Correct. Because quite often it might be the councillor staff member that she is actually permitting to vote on her behalf.
Alright, thank you. No corrections need to be made. Councillor Bain, you're moving.
No.
Councillor Wyatt, please.
So another correction on the Mid-North Coast Regional Arts Board is that I was on
Thank you.
an alternative.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. No other corrections? Councillor Bain, you move?
I move that we move out of committee of the whole.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Freeman? I look both ways until Councillor Freeman's jumping in. Thank you. Councillor Ferguson's upset with me, but I'm sorry. I can't see what I see. Thank you. So, any dissent on moving back into ordinary council? So we can come out of committee of the whole, went in open council. We now need a mover, or do we need a mover to?
You do. So there will be a motion that the recommendation of the committee be adopted.
Okay, so that is the motion. Who would like to put that motion? Councillor Freeman. Do we have a seconder for the motion that we accept the recommendation? Councillor Patterson. I put the motion. Any dissent? I can declare it carried. And I adjourn the meeting for 20 minutes. We'll return at 10 to 11. Thank you, people. Thank you, gallery. Thank you, councillors. We're now moving on to the next item in the agenda, which is Code of Meeting Practice 9.5. It's there before you, the recommendation. And before we consider the recommendation, I'll be moving procedurally that this be addressed at the April Council meeting, and we will ask that or request that a workshop be held for councillors prior to the April meeting so that they can be across all the issues and all parts of the Code of Meeting Practice. So that's my procedural motion. I need a seconder. Councillor Bain. Do you have anyone wishing to speak on the procedural motion? Councillor Patterson.
Could I ask a question?
There's no debate, I'm sorry. But you can ask a question, of course, Councillor Patterson.
Question. Why are you doing that, Mr. Mayor? Why is that procedural motion going in? Like, why are you doing that?
Well, it's a very good question, Councillor Patterson, and it's a very straightforward answer. We have 6 councillors here who have not been taking part in the meetings other than the January one and this one today. They are still learning the ropes and the rules of meetings, and we need to, in my opinion, let them experience this meeting and the March meeting before they make decisions on changes on the rules of meetings. So that's why I'm moving the procedural motion. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Rigdon, question.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, when we had the briefing yesterday, there was a concern, I think, that Mr. Thorogood raised with the...
excuse me, you're asking a question.
Yeah, I'm asking
a question. Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm just doing a lead up to the question.
Okay, thank you.
So is there an issue with the date from the Office of Local Government and the acceptance of the Code of Conduct?
Code of Meeting Practice.
Whatever it is.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if it was deferred to the April meeting, it means that it will have to be adopted at the June meeting. So it has to be out for 6 or have public comment open for 6 weeks. So if anything was to go awry that prevented us from getting that before the June meeting, then we would be put in a position where we wouldn't be able to offer audio-visual attendance to councillors at the June meeting. If there was any comment made on public exhibition that required changes that were of such a substance, so we thought it needed to be re-exhibited, then once again we'd be running short on time to be able to do that on that time frame.
Mr. Thorogood, would it be possible if that came to the case and the General Manager and you decided that we were running short of time, could we have a extraordinary council meeting to decide just this at the time?
Yeah, it'd probably need to be in the next week, though it wouldn't be before the April meeting. So there's to have enough time to potentially have double the window needed, it needs to be adopted at this meeting.
Right. So, further question from Councillor Patterson and then Councillor Bain.
I'd like to, I don't know if this would end up being an amendment or a foreshadowed motion.
No, you can't move
an amendment or a procedural motion.
Councillor Patterson.
Question.
You can ask a question, and that's all you can do.
Okay, so the question is obviously, I think it's just been answered, but at the moment, if we don't adopt this, we're then running without what's the word? Without the requirement, this state government requirement on code of meeting practice. If we don't adopt that now.
No, in the business paper, Councillor Patterson, it says we have 12 months to adopt a new code of meeting practice, and Manager Thorogood has outlined that there might be some issues if we don't have it completed by June. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. If we need to adopt the items around an audio-visual link by June, if we want to offer that to councillors, so that's on a June deadline, whereas we have 12 months to adopt a new code of meeting practice. The existing one stands. I might also just point out, Mr. Mayor, that I did remove that a workshop be held because that would not be a procedural motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bain.
Yeah, my question is, with the removal of the, if at the risk that we may not be able to have audio visual, is that just at council meetings or is that also at briefings and public forums?
Can we have an answer on that?
Technically, it's all three because all three are covered by the code.
Okay, that means you'd have to attend. Thank you. Councillor White, do you have a question?
And potentially, just to follow up with Councillor Bain's question, potentially that's only in the month of June.
Yes.
If we don't, because it could then be adopted in the August meeting. So potentially it's only a month of June.
Sorry, through you, Mayor, at the July meeting, you could, yes, correct.
Oh, and July.
So I might also indicate too, if you were to put this one out on consultation now, nothing prevents councillors during that 8-week window from making changes which are not so significant that it needs to go back out on consultation. So if you are of a mind to, for instance, increase the number of speakers at a public forum, I know it's one of the things that's been talked about. I don't see that you couldn't do that whilst it was on exhibition. That's increasing the rights of the public. You could also have this go out on exhibition now and adopted in 2 meetings' time, as well as then asking for further changes to be made and re-exhibited and adopted 2 meetings later as well. Nothing prevents councillors from taking that course of action.
Mr. General Manager?
Yeah, just add to what Mr. Thorogood's saying there. You've got the opportunity to do that then. You've got the opportunity even today to actually go into committee of the whole and debate any motions and that you could actually put out, then go on exhibition and still have further discussion about it, as Mr. Thorogood has just said.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. General Manager. So we've got an option here. You can vote for the procedural motion and it will come up again by April, or you can vote it down, the procedural motion, and then we would have to address the recommendation before us, and we could move into the committee of the whole to consider any amendments. And I have 8 or 7, I'm not too sure, I've lost track of the numbers, sorry. And we can consider each of those individually. If we accept any of those amendments or any amendments from any of you, that would then be put into the exhibition period document that people could comment on with the general public. So there's your options. You vote for the procedural motion or you vote to consider the amendments today. Another question from Councillor Patterson.
Okay, so this is a question, but I'd probably ask through to the General Manager. Is this not what we're here for as councillors, to debate issues and to talk and discuss about them and then make decisions rather than let them go on? Because I can understand partly the procedural motion, but I don't understand why we can't start it right now.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the councillors certainly are elected to make decisions, to debate topics and make decisions. There is some flexibility in the timing of those, and certainly waiting for another meeting or 2 meetings, it can create, as Mr. Thorogood's pointed out, some very tight timeframes at the end of this, but you have the prerogative of actually doing that. But as we've also pointed out, you could actually have that debate today, get it out on exhibition, have a further debate later on as well and take some of that pressure off.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Thank you for your questions, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Wyatt.
Just to clarify, I can ask a question but not a discussion in this forum.
Yes, you can't have a debate at this time on procedural motion. You can only ask questions.
Okay, so my question is, if we go into the committee as a whole and we have a discussion on the amendments and the plan, then we come out of that committee, can we still then vote in favour of the motion, that the procedural motion that you've put up?
I don't think
the procedural motion's on the floor now. You'll have to make a decision on that first. That's the decision you've got in front of you now, and that's the decision you need to make, unless Councillor Horval chose to withdraw it.
Sorry, just through you, Mr. Mayor, further to that, nothing, if this was to be defeated and then councillors moved into committee to discuss the code of meeting practice, ultimately, if the recommendation of the committee was to defer the matter, that is a recommendation that the committee of the whole could arrive at.
And that would then come back into open council to be part of the motion to be considered. Okay, we'll take a vote on the procedural motion. You're either supporting it or against it, and if you're against it, you're dissenting. So could I have a show of hands, anyone dissenting on the procedural motion? 4. You've changed, Councillor Craigie, you're dissenting now?
No, you meant the number 4.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Bit of ambiguity.
We will take the vote again. Just to be clear, our procedure at the moment is you are dissenting from the procedural motion. You don't have to vote in favour of it. If you're voting in favour of it, you don't put your hand up. If you're voting against it, you put your hand up. So I'll ask again, a show of hands, those people who are dissenting on the procedural motion. That's 4, and 4 in favour. I have a casting vote, and in best interest of coming up with the best result on our code of meeting practice, I vote that we accept the procedural motion, and it now comes to the April meeting for consideration. Thank you, councillors. The code of conduct was in the items passed by exception, as was Point Plomer Road. So no one has to leave the council meeting. I know we do have to deal with that because we're doing 9.7. If someone has a disclosure, they have to leave. So we're doing 9.7, Point Plomer Road at Big Hill, inclusion of Limeburners Creek National Park. Councillor Wyatt is leaving the meeting.
Can I ask a question?
Because of a significant interest in the matter. Councillor Patterson.
Just my question on why Councillor White's leaving. Is it a previous employer or a current employer?
My answer would be it's up to the individual councillor to make a decision on if there's a conflict. She's declared a significant conflict. We don't go to the motives. Did she? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, from my understanding, it's actually Councillor White's changed roles within one huge big department, which has different departments she's actually been in. So yeah, so I think that's why it is. It's previous employer, current employer, sort of one and the same, given the structure of the departments.
Thank you. So we're now dealing with 9.7 Point Plomer Road. It's on page 50 of the agenda. Your light's on, Councillor Craigie. Are you moving something? No?
I wanted to ask a question.
Okay, right. We'll come to questions first after we've had a mover and a seconder, and then I'll ask the questions, okay? Councillor Patterson, would you like to move the motion? Thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Bain. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion, please?
I think we're progressing the area the correct way. We're working in conjunction with the national parks. We're showing that we're flexible, and I think this is a great move forward considering all the work that we've done over the number of years. How many years do we go back through to you, General Manager, if I could ask that question, that this whole Point Plomer Road thing started? Because this to me is looking at the conclusion of that, the movement by council to seal the roads and make it a lot more safer for its users and for the...
Order. Yep. Councillor Patterson, that's not what's before us today. It's not about the sealed road. So have you got a question about the exchange of land?
No, sorry. The exchange of land was based on the roads that we were talking about yesterday. No?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Any questions? Councillor Craigie, do you still have a question on this matter?
Yeah, I do. So my main question was just around the conflict of interest, and it was in addition to Councillor Patterson. It was a single question, but now it's a two-part question. So I don't understand procedurally why it's okay for Councillor Patterson to ask the question and then for me to have to wait to ask a similar question around that.
Okay, well, the ruling is that Councillor Patterson was moving the motion, and to supplement his movement of the motion, I asked a question at the end, but you were still going to be asking your question, and now you get to answer it. I'll ask it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a requirement for reasons of conflict to be divulged publicly?
Councillor, Mr. General Manager?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's actually a requirement that you need to declare the nature of the conflict, or declare the conflict and the nature of the conflict.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll wait till Councillor Patterson returns. Thank you. Councillor Craig, you have another question?
I've asked both.
You lied so long. Sorry, I thought you were wanting more. Thanks a lot. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to clarify that what we're discussing is the agreement to put over a section of council road which is in National Park to National Parks maintenance and to reserve that over to their responsibility, which will remove potential litigation from council, which will remove the responsibility of maintaining that, I think, 1.7 kilometres of road that's inside that unsealed road that's inside National Park. I think that council, I would urge my fellow councillors to support this because it's going to take cost away from council and a potential litigation source away from council. I commend that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. Any other questions or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'll just get Mr. Fish just to clarify, because what Councillor Bain has said is in part correct, but it's actually more than that.
Okay, yes,
Mr. Fish
it is a bit
to
more than
explain that for the public record.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Director Fish.
Yeah, through the Mayor. So there's two parts, I guess, to this report, one being Point Plomer Road and the second being Maria River Road. So firstly, with regards to Point Plomer Road, you were correct, Councillor Bain, there's a 1.3 kilometre length of Point Plomer Road to the south of the works that we've done to seal it. That length of road over Big Hill is wholly contained within National Park, and this report is obviously to have that transferred or be incorporated into the National Park going forward. The second part of the report relates to Maria River Road. There's some anomalies there between the physical road and the legal road reserve, and that impacts upon National Park. And to resolve that, there needs to be no net loss in land area of National Park. Now, the areas of Maria River Road where we have, I guess, a section of or short parts of road within National Park, it's already the physical road there. It's just obviously addressing the road reserve corridor. So it's a requirement, or there's a pathway to address the issue by ensuring there's no net loss in National Park land. So effectively, there will be a small loss of National Park land area along Maria River Road, and that's purely because that's where the physical road exists at the moment, and that will be offset by incorporating the length of Point Plomer Road over Big Hill into the National Park.
Thank you, Director Fish. Any other questions or people wishing to speak in favour or against the motion in front of us? If not, I'll put the motion. Anyone dissent from the motion? No one dissenting. I declare it carried. We'll wait for a moment while we wait for Councillor Wyatt to be asked to return, if you don't mind. And we're going to come to 9.8 on page 52.
9.8 was in the block. Will be on confidential.
Oh, what? You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was out. Sorry. So the data attachment was in? Yeah. Okay. So we've finished the open meeting agenda. we now have a confidential session.
Mr.
So
Mayor,
I'm going
Mr. Mayor?
to ask someone to move. Oh, yes, Councillor Bain.
Please, before we move into the confidential session, I would like to, I'll wait for Councillor Wyatt to return. I would like to move an urgency motion arising from the Crescent Head Residents and Ratepayers Association meeting this week, last week. I would like to move that Council extends the time for submissions by 3 weeks. I'm not too clear on how long, but there's been some questions regarding.
Right, before you go any further, Councillor Bain,
right, 3 weeks.
I need to know what the urgency matter. Can this be dealt with at the March meeting? Yes or no?
No. By the time of the March meeting, the time for submissions will have closed.
Okay, so
Sorry, let's just
I'll just make sure that our urgency motion is correct. If the urgency is, before I finish, I'll ask you, Councillor Manager Thorogood, to supplement what I'm saying. We need to understand that the urgency motion is dealing with a matter that must be dealt with before the March Council meeting. If that's the case, then it becomes an acceptable urgency motion under the present Code of Meeting Practice. And
sorry,
the
Mr.
person
Mayor.
can speak to it. So, but first of all, I'll get some directions from Manager Thorogood on this issue.
So I was going to say, let's just go to 9.3 in the Code of Meeting Practice first, which says, despite Clause 9.1, business may be considered at a meeting of the Council, even though due notice of the business has not been given to councillors if A, a motion is passed to have the business considered at the meeting, and B, the business is to be considered, the business to be considered is ruled by the chairperson to be of great urgency on the grounds that it requires a decision by the council before the next scheduled ordinary meeting of council. A motion moved under clause 9.3A can be moved without notice. Despite clauses 10.20 to 10.30, only the mover of a motion referred to in clause 9.3A can speak to the motion before it is put. And a motion of dissent cannot be moved against the ruling by the chairperson under clause 9.3B. So what this means, the process to move an urgency motion is Councillor Bain moves a motion that he wants business concerning submissions, and he wasn't clear on what, to be considered at this meeting. He moves the motion, somebody needs to second it, then he can speak to it, and it immediately goes to the vote.
Okay.
After that is voted on, the chair then rules whether or not it's great urgency. If the chair rules that it is not a matter of great urgency, we're done. If the chair rules that it is, then he can move the actual motion that he wishes to move.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Thorogood. So a motion is passed to have the business considered at the meeting, and 9.4 says that the motion moved under clause 9.3 can be moved without notice, despite clauses 10.2 and 10.3. Only the mover of the motion referred to in 9.3A can speak to the motion before it is put. So I now ask Councillor Bain to speak to the motion, and I've just been told that the submissions for that item close on the 28th of February.
Correct. So I'm sorry, I didn't put that motion very well. Let me rephrase it.
But yeah, you speak to it now, and then I'll
words.
rule.
You've got some words?
Yeah, let's just see.
Okay, so there's four reasons that, four questions that came up that the community would like addressed.
Is there a seconder for this motion?
It needs to have a seconder.
Thank you. I do need a second. Thank you, Councillor Patterson, for correcting me. Anyone like to second it? Councillor Ferguson, seconded it. Thank you.
Okay, so so some of the concerns that the residents and ratepayers at Crescent Head communicated on last week was about the drainage. So the development has a 1 metre high retaining wall as a drainage around it, but the question was, what's going to happen to that water that gets diverted into what is essentially a bit of swampland out the back of Crescent Head. They also requested access to data on a more recent traffic assessment, because the traffic assessment that they have, the data is from 2018, and there's been quite a significant increase in tourist engagement and traffic flow since 2018, and I believe in the during the process of the tarring of Point Plomer, there's some more up-to-date data that is available, but hasn't that they believe they haven't had access to. They had questions regarding infrastructure capacity. Now, I'm aware that the water and sewerage at Crescent Head are being improved and they're being upgraded, but they have questions about how that's going to coordinate with the construction of the development. And another issue was, has there been any assessments done on the impact of wildlife, or for example of companion animals, dogs and cats, in the new development of 109 dwellings, which could potentially be subdivided and could end up being more like a couple of hundred. So those are the reasons why I believe there's urgency, and the people that attended that meeting have asked for an extension of time. Thank you.
So, Councillor Bain, could I just ask you this question? What is your motion? Extending it by 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? I'm not sure.
He gets to place his motion after the council has decided whether or not it's a matter of whether or not it'll be dealt with at this meeting.
Yes. So we'll deal with the intricate part of the extension after. We now have a decision on whether council considers it a matter of urgency.
Can we ask questions?
No, not a matter of urgency, because I make that decision as chair. So you are voting on whether you consider this should be considered at this council meeting. Okay, so that's what your vote will be. But I have a question from Councillor Patterson.
Can I ask this question through to Director Fish? That what is the difference in this? Is this something that would be dealt with under council delegation for this development, i.e. the DA design, etc., and also the new biodiversity plan that we've just passed? So what sort of impact does that have? Are we needing in time-wise to do that?
Director Fish?
Yeah, through the Mayor. So this development application is on notification for a period of 4 weeks. So it's between the 31st of January and the 28th of February. Typically, notification periods or exhibition periods are 14 days, but in this instance, it's extended. This particular application, staff are delegated to determine development applications where there aren't variations to the LEP, the local environmental plan. I'm not aware that there is a variation in this instance, so it will more than likely, I would expect it will be determined obviously by staff because of that.
So those questions would be managed by staff?
Yes, so the questions that have been raised are things that you would put in a submission due to the development application being on public exhibition, and then our planners would obviously consider those questions and determine whether more information was needed from the applicant and basically go from there.
Councillor Riddington wishes to speak.
Thank you. Just a question for Director Fish. So we've had a month, and that's up on the 28th of February. Is there a problem with extending that particular public consultation, given COVID, given Christmas, given the whole world?
Through the Mayor, so it
Director Fish, thank you.
It just extends the period of assessment by whatever the time that you would be seeking to extend it by. There's typically there are statutory requirements in terms of the periods that we need to notify, and our staff would comply with that. I guess if you were to do something different here, could then be questioned why you wouldn't do it differently with another development application. So what would be the difference here?
Okay, thank you. One more question from Councillor Freeman and then Councillor Patterson.
Actually, forgot it just then. So, with the feedback and evidence that they're requesting as part of their request, is there any possible insight they could return with that would be different to what the staff would get from looking at those questions? So, if there's feedback that they could come up with after looking at the evidence, I think it's important that they're allowed to return with that. But if that's going to be the same stuff that council staff discovers, then there's no need for extra time. They can just put the questions to council.
Order, Councillor Freeman. You've just got to ask the question. You're kind of drifting into arguing your case. So the question is, Councillor Fish, can you answer it, please?
Yeah.
Sorry, Director Fish. I'll get it right one day.
Through the Mayor. So, yeah, our council planners obviously assess the application and considering relevant legislation and the merit, obviously, of the proposal. And as I said earlier, the submissions that are made, they'll consider the merit of those. Some issues that are raised may require a response from the applicant, for example, which would then be sought, and that ultimately, I guess, or assists in forming the planner's position. So until I guess they're able to undertake a thorough consideration of what comes in from the submissions, it's difficult to forecast what could potentially occur. I would note that certainly at least some of those issues, if not all of them, were certainly discussed at the time of the rezoning. So things like traffic, drainage and service capacity was certainly discussed at the time of the rezoning. Clearly our staff who are experts in those fields around capacity of those systems will need to do the relevant or they have to fully understand those to ensure that your existing systems or upgrades proposed will meet the obviously demand of the development.
Thank you, Director, Operations and Planning, Fish. Very extensive. We're going to have questions at the moment. We cannot debate it. We've got to put the motion and then we can debate the motion that Councillor Bain will put up. A question, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. Just to put this into perspective, my question is, what is the number of members of the Crescent Head Ratepayers Association? Is it 1 or 2 or is it 500? I need to be able to put it in perspective.
Councillor Patterson, that's not relevant to whether we have an urgency motion. That's what we're having at the moment.
I debate
Yeah, but I order that question is not relevant at the moment. I rule it. I don't order it. Thank you. So we're going to put.
No, I've got a question. Sorry.
Another
Mr.
question,
Mayor.
Councillor Wyatt.
My question is through the Mayor. Does council ever have a practice of in development applications such as this to go and talk to the community directly to gather their feedback, or do you just specifically rely on written community feedback? So my question is there an opportunity, would council planning staff, approving staff go out and meet with the community to gather their feedback direct?
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt. Director Fish.
Yeah, through there. So with particular development applications, certainly our assessing officers will go and meet with particular individuals to, if required, to understand certain concerns or whatever they may be. It certainly hasn't been practiced to hold anything that's like a public meeting or anything like that. Those wishing to make a submission obviously have the opportunity through the notification period to raise the concerns they have, and it hasn't been uncommon where we would have planners go and meet with a person who's made a submission to further understand a concern that's been raised.
Thank you, Director Fish. Mr. General Manager.
I'll just add to that for the councillors' benefit that public meetings on whether it's a DO or other things can be very, very emotive, and what the councillors and the council officers have to do is make very objective assessments, and that's where we encourage people to put their submissions in writing, and clearly from what Councillor Bain has said, that the community members he's spoken to there have got some very clear ideas already, so they've certainly got at least, depending on what happens now, but got at least nearly 2 more weeks to actually get those in anyway. And the other thing we do at times, just generally, is we can take the councillors out for a site inspection as well, where it's actually relevant as well, and we have done that in the past.
Yep, site inspections are really important. Thank you, Mr. General Manager. So I'll now move to Councillor Bain. You have another question? So you can't speak to it anymore.
I can't speak to it.
No, okay.
A question through you, Mr. Mayor, for have the have the community been given access to the data, to the most recent data on traffic movements on Point Plomer Road?
No, I'll rule that out of order. We're actually deciding whether urgency motion, if the motion then is allowed, then we can have those questions and debate what your motion will be. So right now, councillors, you've got to make a decision. Do you consider this a matter of urgency and should be dealt with now? And if that's the case, we'll then have a motion to debate. So that is the motion at the moment, that we deal with this matter now. Anyone dissent on that motion? No? I declare that the motion will be dealt with now, and I declare that it is a matter of urgency. So we now need Councillor Bain to move the actual motion that you require an extension, and for how long?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will move the motion that we extend the community consultation on the development of Baker Drive at Crescent Head for a further 2 weeks.
Past 28th of February.
Past the 28th of February.
Yes, thank you. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Wyatt. Now we have questions about this issue from anyone, or you can speak in favour or against the motion. Councillor Patterson.
Okay, so that's my question is through to Director Fish. What we're talking about, are we trying to make decisions for you guys because we're given the community 4 weeks? There's still nearly 2 weeks to go before that time is up to give written notice of concerns to council. I am especially wary about this where Councillor Bain had no specific timeline, where it's nearly 2 weeks to the end of the submission, or
Councillor
Patterson, 2 weeks.
Councillor Patterson, order.
My question is...
Yeah, you just ask the question. You can't debate and then say what Councillor Bain said. Thank you.
My question is that trying to take away the delegation that we as council give you guys to pass projects like this by kicking it down the road continuously over a group of people where there might only be 10 members?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's simply providing the extra 14 days. Council has done that in the past with other things where they have extended some timeframes. Obviously, from a staff point of view, we'd like to get these things dealt with as quickly as possible, but it is the prerogative of the council to extend it should they wish.
Any other councillors wish to speak or ask a question? Councillor Riddington.
It's not a question, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to say I don't think adding another 2 weeks onto the public consultation process would be too onerous. I think that for the benefit of the public, I think that would be quite a reasonable thing to do.
Mr. Mayor, can I just make
Thank you, and Mr. General Manager would like to make a further comment.
It's just a point of clarification. Because it's planning, it's actually community notification, not consultation.
Oh,
it's just a simple word thing. It's not something you'd know, and I wouldn't expect you to know, but we just need to clarify it's actually notification from a planning perspective.
Yeah, and in that notification period, Mr. General Manager, that's when people can make submissions. That's correct. Right, thank you very much. Are there anyone else asking a question, speaking for or against? Councillor Craigie.
Just want to understand the communication behind the notification period. So just on terms of how was that information given to the community, and how many people do you know would be aware of this?
Thank you, Councillor. Director Fish.
Yeah, through the Mayor. So the landowners within the township of Crescent Head and some of the surrounds were notified by a letter of this, and obviously the period that they had to make submission. That was a very large mail out for that to occur. So it involves considerable staff time. So I wouldn't I certainly, it would be a significant burden on staff if they were required to write to all those properties again to notify them of this extension. I think it would just be something we would put on the website and potentially communicate it through other means.
Thank you, Director Fish. Further question? Yes. Councillor Craigie first, because he is asking the series. Yes.
So just to encourage you to expand on your answer, so you mentioned that there was a large mail out. How many letterbox drops?
Through the Mayor, I can't tell you the number, but each landowner of a dwelling within Crescent Head was notified, and some of the surrounds, so quite a large area. And it is rare that we would do such a large mail out unless it's for a development that is obviously of significance like this one.
Councillor Wyatt, please.
Just in support, so 3 of us attended a meeting at Crescent Head the other day, and where they did raise some concerns, and particularly the motion that Councillor Bain has put up. There are, and just for Councillor Patterson's benefit, there's probably about 30 people there with representation from business, landowners, ratepayers, residents. Yeah, so about 30 people, and their primary issues were around the traffic and the access road and the flooding and access to a traffic study. It was also acknowledged that I was provided with a map of the area that was letterbox dropped, and I don't have it here, but it's quite large that I saw. But there was acknowledgement that a few people at that meeting said that they didn't receive it for whatever reason. So I'd say that council did do quite a good job in that, but I do think that they should have an extra 2 weeks. Crescent Head is very emotive. It's quite divided. There's lots of different groups there. There's lots going on at Crescent Head. Perhaps it's beyond capacity of people to process everything that's going on. So I don't think it's unreasonable to give another 2 weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Wyatt. Anyone else wish to make a comment or speak in favour or against or ask another question? We have Councillor Craigie.
I'm just thinking practically, just a comment. If we extended for another 2 weeks and we did the mail out again, are we factoring, would you factor in the time of the letter getting to the box?
Well, thank you, Councillor Craigie. Director Fish has already said that they don't intend to do another mail out if this is carried. It will just be put publicly. So, Director Fish or Mr. General Manager.
Yeah, we certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor, we certainly wouldn't be doing another mail out. What we did do previously was a very, very extensive mail out, as has been said, and we can provide the councillors with a map of what actually that area that was covered. It is not just within the township of Crescent Head, it's actually quite extensive beyond the township itself. But we also place public notices in the newspapers, and we also have a major news story on our website as well. So we continue to use other means through our social media and that to actually get the information out that there is an actual extension to this. And I know the Crescent Head ratepayers would get that message out through their network very quickly as well.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Any further questions or comments? And if not, yes, we have some. Councillor Patterson, please.
Thank you. I just want to make the comment that I have been part of the council over many years that have extended the time. But I just think that this has had an extensive mail out. It's had extensive. We over about 2.5 years ago, we started a Crescent Head master plan, which development of this site was part of that. We have had lots of consultation. I just worry about that us setting too many precedents over minuteness continually. But 2 weeks is 2 weeks. It's not a big deal.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Ferguson, please.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Is there more new information available that we can provide to these ratepayers that's been hinted that they request?
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. Since it's been placed on exhibition, no, there's not. Okay. Yeah, all the information we have is actually being placed up there. The information is provided by the applicant themselves, and that as well. That's available. One more.
Thank you.
One more.
Councillor Patterson, you can't speak on it again, but you can ask a question.
Yeah, question. So the question through you to General Manager is just about the one of the questions that were raised about the traffic management. Is that not something that would be dealt with the DA through the traffic committee, etc.?
Mr. Fish.
Yeah, through the Mayor. Yes, certainly. Obviously, traffic generation and those sorts of things will be a consideration of the assessment process. The applicant obviously would have done some work in that regard as part of their application, would have included information, and our engineers will certainly consider that and determine the appropriateness of what's obviously proposed.
So nothing will be passed on data from sealing a Plomer's lane, because obviously you see that seems to be an issue that there's more traffic out there. So it would be something that would be assessed on current time, current issues.
Yeah, through the Mayor. So our planners would obviously consider whatever information they have available to them. I believe we did do a traffic count through the Christmas period, but I would note that was through the Christmas period, which is a peak period. So obviously we can compare that with what we've had from previous periods. We are in quite unique times as well in terms of domestic travel and those sorts of things at the moment. So I always take, particularly over the last couple of years, any traffic counts that have been done with a bit of a grain of salt. But hopefully we'll obviously see some normality as we start to move forward.
And part of the traffic arrangement on this site, would that majority of that cost be burdened by the actual the developer? Let's just say it's a huge roundabout or a 10 lane anything, would that not be by the developer and not by the ratepayer?
Yeah, so through the Mayor, it'll depend on whether it meets the warrants based on the traffic it will generate, so considering turning movements and intersections and those sorts of things. So they all get considered through the assessment process, and the applicant would have also done that as part of their application.
Thank you. With no more people seeking the call, I'll put the motion.
As the mover, may I speak last?
Yes, you speak last, but so let's be clear. No one else asking questions, speaking for or against. Councillor Bain.
The request is really based on access to information. The community were perturbed by the traffic assessment, which, according to what I was informed, it may be wrong, but was that the assumption was that 50% of traffic departing out onto Baker Drive would be turning left and 50% would be turning right, on the assumption that people are going to live there who work in Port Macquarie. Now, the locals there said it's impossible to get through there without a four-wheel drive at this point, and so they were questioning the accuracy of that assessment and requesting the most recent data, understanding that was taken during a peak period. But the point was also raised by the business owners there that peak period is almost full on there now. That where before Crescent had 6 to 8 weeks of the year that were very, very busy, it's now busy pretty much all of the time. So yes, they're requesting more access to information. They would like the data on that, on the most, because the data that they've got on traffic assessment is based from 2018, which is no longer relevant. And so I would ask councillors to give them this extra time to gather that information and to have time to put in a informed submission. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. I'll now put the motion that's on the screen before you. I would ask anyone who's dissenting to raise their hand. 2 dissents. I declare that the motion has been carried, that the notification period be extended by 2 weeks. Thank you very much. That's the end of our open council. We now need a motion to move into confidential. I need someone to move that. Councillor Riddington, thank you. The seconder, please. Councillor Bain. Anyone dissent to moving into confidential? No? Now that we've passed that,
In relation to resolutions taken by Council in closed session, item 11.1 legal matters, Council resolved that Council receive and note the report.
Thank you. And in open council, I'm about to close the meeting, but I wish you all councillors the best in your legal battle with this in the Supreme Court. I know it's a very trying time, and for you, I wish you all the best in the next couple of weeks, because decisions will be made and it affects the future of Kempsey Council. So thank you all, and I declare the meeting closed.